ICR down in near San Diego there.
Okay.
And they don't, as my memory serves, which is getting sort of iffy, the memory.
I understand that.
They didn't really specifically talk about, okay, we're getting, getting toward the end of
Something?
what happened. There was creation and my thought is that all since that everything was created, and less than in the first
In 6 days?
in 6 days.
Yeah, right.
And
So we've got 0, that's the time of creation.
everything being compressed from millions down to thousands. Actually, they're talking billions now, aren't they?
Well, the age of the Earth is about 4.5 billion. The age of the solar system, 12 to 15, or the universe, 12 to 15 billion, depending on who you ask. All right?
Okay, but that's based on what?
That's based on radioactive decay. Okay?
But carbon,
Mainly.
Well, carbon dating is a little bit different. Carbon dating is only used to date recently dead stuff. All right, so you date the wood, or you date the bone, the mummy, that kind of a thing, or the sarcophagus. Technically, carbon-14 is good back 50,000 years, according to the evolutionists. All right. Now we think there's some problems with carbon-14, and in fact, we think that when they do the dating, there's a real problem. That they always find that C14s, when they do their samples, there's always this sort of resident signal. What this suggests is that C14 is still present in some of these samples in a way that, well, for instance, we took various levels in the geologic column, coal, all right, and other things, and we dated it with C14. Well, like I said, back past 50,000 years, the evolutionist says you shouldn't find a signal. We found a signal here, and in 100 million year old stuff here, and in 200 million year old stuff here. Okay? What this suggests is that these layers aren't that old, if carbon-14 is correct. Okay? And in fact, the amount of carbon-14 signal we found in these other layers seems to be pretty much the same, which suggests these things were all laid down at the same time. That's interesting. We've also looked in diamonds. I can't draw a diamond. I'm too poor. All right. Anyway, you know what a diamond looks like. All right. We found carbon-14 signals in diamond. Now, the significance of this is these things are supposed to be, some of them, primordial. All right. They're at the foundations of the earth, according to the evolutionists. Primordial. All right. Somebody will learn how to spell too. Okay. Suggests that they're very young. Okay, now this is in some of the work that's done by the radiometric dating project that ICR put out. They talk about this, and there's some, I didn't bring the videos, but they have good videos that explain a lot of what this means. All right, so just using carbon-14, although it's not supposed to date rocks, it's just supposed to date recently dead stuff. We find a signal going all the way back that seems to be similar and suggests that all of these were laid out at the same time and not so long ago. We also think there's a reason to suggest that radioactive decay was accelerated in the past. No, that's not how that's spelled either, but you get the basic idea. It's accelerated, okay? And we get that from various things. We see the polonium halos. There's these granitic rocks. There's these circles that go out. And we see polonium, I forget what the numbers are right now, but there are halo effects from some of these things. And it suggests they wouldn't be there if the rock wasn't almost crystallized instantly And it also suggests that some of this stuff happened rapidly. I don't have it all in my head right now, and the coffee's starting to wear off, so I'm getting a little bit woozy, all right? But it suggests that there was an accelerated decay in the past, okay? This is all some of the work that ICR did with the radioisotope dating project. The name of the books are, what's it called?
Thousands, not millions.
Yeah, the rate project, basically. Right. I forget what the 2-volume set we put out. We put out first what we thought we were gonna find, and so we published a volume on all those papers. Then we did the work on it and published a volume on what we found. And some of the stuff is interesting. The C14 stuff is amazing. Okay, now there needs to be more work done. We just had a few samples. It'd be nice to sample stuff worldwide and get into that really. So if you've got a couple $100 million laying around, or you want to help with this project, give us a call. I'll get with the right people. Man, we can do stuff. All right. The dating is what suggests the age of the Earth. Keep in mind, in the 1800s, the age of the Earth was millions of years old. In fact, until the end of the 1800s, the age of the Earth was maybe 20 million years old. Because Kelvin said by just heating and cooling of the Earth, it can't be any more than that. And his stuff was, nobody could find a way around it. Until in the early 1900s, they discovered radioactivity. And of course, you know what happened from there. Then they looked at the nature of the atom. Einstein came up with relativity, and we realized EMC squared, and that's how we beat, the Japanese and the Nazis and all this, and the Cold War and all that. It all comes from radioactive decay, all right? So it's all hanging on that, but there are anomalies. That's what scientists look for. That's what we look for in the global warming stuff, by the way. It's not consensus. If you find anomalies and stuff that doesn't fit, something's wrong. And there is a lot of them. Don't get me started. All right. Okay, so that's what we see. And that's why we think we can make a case for a young Earth. Can we put it in the thousands of years? I think we've got some good answers, or at least some reasons why to call this into question to the extent that we can. Especially if the C14 stuff is correct. Okay, because that's a relatively short half-life. A half-life is how much, see these are big atoms, and they fall apart quickly. They shoot out different things, neutrons, that sort of thing. And so they get smaller, and they actually change form. All right, so uranium decays into lead, this kind of thing. Samarium into neodymium, and all these other words that you can't pronounce. All right. And there are very definite decay chains giving off these things. So as we see this, and if it's an accelerated thing like we're talking about, the age of the Earth is probably a lot less than we think. All the age of the Earth is based on this stuff, okay? Now, the solar system, it's a little bit different. That's based, and the universe is based on the redshift from the stars, but there's a reason to call that into question also. So you've opened up a huge can of worms now that'll take some study to get all the answers you want. Yes, sir?
So how do evolutionists answer that issue about C14? What is their explanation?
To be honest, I haven't looked and seen many of the responses for that, but they would say things like, well, you obviously got contaminated specimens, all right, would be one of the ways you would say that. And the problem is we did all the stuff, we had outside laboratories do a lot of the testing. We went deep in the rock, we had all the washes like everybody was supposed to. We had other people doing certain parts so we wouldn't contaminate it all. And so there always seems to be this C14 signal, and when we hit each of them, now, it could be contamination, I agree with you, all right? But it turns out, if you've got several different things that are contaminated in just the same way from different places, the odds, you start going, whoa, wait a minute, that's pretty hard to do. I mean, even if we wanted to cheat, that'd be hard, okay? It would seem to me. And so, we've got that. Now, again, don't just blow us off. You guys don't know how to do research. You're not a C14 specialist or something like that. I could see all of those. And there might be some legitimate reasons to call this into question. We're not saying it's the end-all and be-all. But what we're trying to do is look for anomalies in the data. Okay? We found some very interesting stuff, it seems. All right? You can read the books, and there's a good video that explains it all. That's done in a way that you don't have to be a PhD in physics to understand, all right? And it's based on just what we see, okay?
What's the name of that video?
Let's see. let's see, there's one they did at the conference, but I don't know if that's available anymore. Look up, what would it be? It would be the
RATE.
Rate Project, yeah.
Rate Project, RATE.
Radioisotope, I think it's on the age of the Earth or something like that. There's videos, so if you look up radioactive decay and look up DVDs for that on the ICR website, and also probably AIG has some of this too. I don't know if they sell, distribute it. But the Institute for Creation Research is the one that did the initial work on this. I understand they're trying to do a rate 2 project. Well, I hope that'd be interesting. And like I said, if you've got a couple $1 million laying around and you want to shake up things, baby.
I know it's getting late, but Andrew Snelling said that anything that has significant carbon in it, a bone, coal, whatever, C14 will be present.
Yeah. Even
So why isn't our challenge to any university throughout the world, do your own research, get anything with significant carbon, and test for it? Why don't we do that?
we probably have, because they put papers in various places when they did this stuff too. So they've been to various conferences. You understand the significance of what this means.
I do.
It's not just the age of the earth,
It's evolution.
okay? It's more than that. It's the nature of,
Yeah.
okay?
Evolu-
Evolution is not so much a theory about science as it is about God.
Yeah.
If God made the world, well then there's a whole set of things that falls from it. Ethics, morality, all descends from God. If there is no God and evolution is true, well then you can have 55 genders like some people are saying. All right? All right? Yeah. Okay? You can be that confused.
Yeah.
All right? I mean, it's not that hard. Look down, see what you got. All right. Okay, right? It seems to me, okay? But that's then where you get confused. And then well, there's no such thing as black and white. It's all gray. Well, it is if you don't have any standards. All right? And once you pull creation out and look at, when you read your Bible, look at how many times it talks about the God who made the world and all that in it is. 2 Peter chapter 3 says, in the last days there'll come scoffers walking after their own lusts, saying, where is the promise of God's coming? For all things continue as they were since the beginning of creation. But it says they forget something. They forget that the world that then was overflowed with water and perished, the flood. All right? That's the big event. That's God's first real big judgment. Kind of washed the whole place down. All right? And then it says, yeah, and they continue to do what they want to. And he says, the next time it's not going to be a flood. It's going to be by fire. Okay? He's going to roll up the... I don't know what that's going to be. Those are scary verses to my mind. But it suggests, Peter is saying, in the last days, people won't believe any of this. Okay? But they forget that there was a worldwide flood, that God made the world, that there was a flood, all right, and that his judgment will be sometime. All right? That's exactly what you have today. When you talk about Noah's Ark and stuff like that, that's, kids, that's a cool story for kids. Buy them the little boat, have them stick the animals on there. But, come on. You're in the 21st century now. Let's have a little bit of reality here, all right? As far as morals and ethics, well, you kind of make that up as you go along. And we see how well that's working out, all right? It's messy. It's getting real messy, okay? We don't know what marriage is anymore. It can be between a man, and what you're seeing now is, you're seeing polygamy on the rise. And eventually you're going to see, like you saw with Julius, during the Caesars, they're going to marry animals, all right? That's coming along, all right? You see people doing that stuff, all right? So, all right, fine. That's not how God defined marriage, and he's the one that made it. Now, again, if he didn't make anything, then he's got no cause to hold it down. If he did, then all this stuff descends from there, but nobody believes that anymore. We got rid of religion in the last century. Come on, okay? You guys are the crazy ones believing in all this. In fact, you're dangerous, all right? And we're going to come get you, all right? And you see a lot of people talking like that, all right? I won't get political too much, but look at what the president has said in the last couple of weeks. Now, I know he says a lot of stuff, but some things he said are pretty plain, okay? That maybe we should do, and everybody's over there, oh, he's a madman, for believing in, or like today, what did he do? He, the healthcare thing, all right? Well, you have a right to this sort of stuff, and yeah, that's in the Constitution. No, it's not, okay? and, you know, oh, you're killing people and all this sort of, no. We're working out what rules and laws should be to govern our country. And when we first came a lot of that descended from biblical viewpoints, biblical worldview. That's gone now. So it doesn't matter. And we will be considered the dangerous ones, all right? I mean, what I'm talking about now is probably gonna be subversive, all right? They'll cart me away. All right, fine. As long as they feed me. No, well, no, what was I reading the other day? I'm doing a Sunday school class on the history of the Reformation in England. And you hear about during Queen Mary's time, some of the martyrs. William Tyndale and some of these guys. It's, you know, I'm a brave person, I think, but I don't know, that stuff, okay? And that's what they think. They think it's dangerous to think this way. Now, we're just trying to find the truth. I think the Bible is correct for a lot of reasons. Part of the reason I went into science is because I had some of these same questions, and I'm trying to figure it out. I think I have some basic answers to these things, all right? I also think a biblical worldview solves a lot of problems that people don't even know that they have, all right? Ethics and morality and all this. I think it is bad to steal, all right? I think it is bad to lie. I think that destroys relationships, and I can see that in the social sciences too, when people ignore that sort of stuff. I work in a group home, and there's a lot of rules that we can't do with the kids, and I think it messes them up more, all right? Because it's coming from a non-Christian worldview. All right. Yes, sir, you had another question.
Yes, if let's say there was no Bible that talks about Noah's flood, about any of age of the earth, etc.
Right.
Current evidence, what would it describe? So let's say if the agenda of evolutionist was not, there is no God and moral issues, what would be the evidence, what it shows, how, in your perspective? And I know you've done a lot of research.
What?
If let's say there was no Bible that describes what happened from an eyewitness of the person who actually created it.
All right, Romans 1 seems to suggest that it's clearly evident that there is a God, okay? So it seems to suggest we can look at creation. So what would we look at? Well, we'd probably look at design, okay? Now, I know a lot of people blow that off and say, well, evolution can do that, but evolution is a time and chance process. And the more, for instance, we're learning about computers and stuff, these guys are looking to biological processes in order to mirror them, all right? Now, again, if it's time and chance, you know, that starts to really stretch the thing, okay? Come on, have you ever looked, one of the reasons I love biochemistry is it tells you how stuff happens in your body. And when it doesn't happen right, what goes down, all right? It's incredible what goes on in your cells and all that sort of thing. There are little miniature machines at almost a molecular level that are doing stuff. You're telling me that developed over time? I don't even almost understand how all this works, let alone having developed by a blind process, all right? So I think the design argument has a lot to it, all right? When we look around the world then, just in our area here, we see these huge mountains, we see these plate boundaries, we see these giant layers of fossils all over the place. It does look like something happened here that's not happening now, okay? And the evolutionists are coming more and more over that. Let's see, I can bring it here. The Nature of the Stratigraphic Record by Derek Ager. He's a geologist. He's an old school evolutionist. But the book he wrote suggested that, you know, we got to rethink the geologic column. It's not slow, gradual over hundreds of millions of years like Lyell and Hutton and some of these other guys talked about. It's slow, it's huge areas of time, and then just total terror, okay? Now, the time is in between the gaps, all right? And if that's not there, then it's not a whole lot of time with terror every once in a while. It's a whole lot of terror at one time. Ooh, that sounds good. All right.
Yeah, now, it's also fair to note that it is a what if, and a very interesting what if. Whether we have the Bible or whether we don't, you can imagine the scientific evidence stays the same, and particularly the design. What we may not realize about the Bible is a big topic in its own right, is the way the Bible as we have it is woven into a whole lot of discovery. Okay, we have writing known to have existed a certain limited amount of time, and the biblical roots are tied in with that all the way back. And so what we're talking about for the history of the Bible itself, we tend to think of it as an arbitrary book that somebody put together, and then there's the source of it, and the sources of it actually are far bigger. And so it's actually very hard to imagine history being known without the Bible, because it is tied in with anything we know about ancient and recent history of man.
In the 1800s, a lot of people ridiculed the Bible. In the 1800s, we had the theory of evolution come along. We also had what we call higher criticism. Okay? But also what started to happen is the field of archaeology really started to get for instance, the Bible talked about the Hittites as a great and mighty nation. And a lot of people believe that off because there's no evidence for the Hittites. Then they started finding the evidence for the Hittites. And until about, maybe 1000 BC, the Hittites were a force to be reckoned with in Turkey. Okay? We find a mighty nation that the Egyptians went against and all these sorts of things. So the Bible was talking about this stuff all the time. Another thing I like to mention is we have ancient documents from different groups about their relatives going all the way back. And a lot of these seem to support what's talking about in Scripture. Now, these documents today are sort of dismissed by some of the communities, but there's a good book called After the Flood, or Before the Flood, and it talks about these genealogies. It's by, what's his name? Can't remember, but that's the title. But
There's another
Cooper, yeah, Dr. Cooper.
Another book title that I can mention as well, that taking the post-flood is From Abraham to Paul. That's the title of it, and Andrew Steinman is the author. And essentially what he has done is taken two famous characters and lots of characters in between, worked out the chronology year by year, very exhaustive work. From Abraham to Paul, Andrew Steinman, Steinmann. And you can get the book for $80, and I've seen shorthands of it, timelines that he's published for free. And so what you have there is a staggering amount of evidence, many vast libraries of evidence on actually the year by year for quite a long chunk of time, and that's taking a recent chunk. And so that kind of illustrates that, if you're talking about the Bible, we are not talking about a novel.
Yeah, but you see the people who are evolutionists, they will try to figure out a way to disprove anything, and they might say, well, it might be accurate when it comes to day, but the Bible doesn't know about the history. So in order to discuss with them, you need to come up with sources that they can acknowledge as valid. So for example, what we find is a valid source.
Right, now that's the issue, okay?
Yes.
What people will do is generally say, well, that source is invalid, they made it all up. That's what some of the stuff they do with After the Flood. But as we look at it, okay, there are incidents, for instance, mentioned in there that seem to suggest, even in England, that you've got a timeline going all the way back to Ham, Japheth, and Shem, okay? And they've got a pretty good genealogical line starting from there, okay? Geoffrey of Monmouth and some of these others. So there is, and we see this in the Chinese and some other things. So as we look in the anthropology record of, around the world, there are suggestions that what we see in the Bible is correct. Now, the secularist is always going to blow these things off, okay? The question is what's true or not, all right? And so that's what we have to make up. So let me have one last thing. I'll talk about searching for hidden animals. Now, are there any dinosaurs today? Ooh. Well, no, not really. Okay, we don't see any. However, out of Africa, for a few years now, The natives talk about a thing called Mokele-mbembe. All right. It's one who stops the flow of rivers or eat at the top of the trees. It's supposedly in the central Congo. Now, a lot of the central Congo is what we call aerial root swamp. The trees do this and into the water. Nobody really goes into there. A group went in there in the early 80s, the Regusters expedition. Regusters. Anyway, and they did some reconnoitering around. It was pretty nasty. They did get some voice prints, though, of various animals. So they got elephant, you know, and you put it on the thing. This guy was from Jet Propulsion Lab, so he was able to analyze some of these things. One sound they heard, though, was a huge roar with a pop at the end of it. Okay, wasn't like anything they had on record. Some suggest this is the Mokele-mbembe. The natives there say, yeah, there are certain places where it is, and everything else, like the hippos and all that, all scattered. Okay, now they could be lying, you know, the pygmies are just trying to get something from you or whatever. All right, but they seem to talk about these things. Some of these regions are very unexplored, and there's a possibility. All right. Let's say we're going to find one, but again, if you got a couple extra million laying around, you don't know what to do with, we've got some expeditions that we might want to, you know, find the lost world. If we found one of these babies, it would be profound, okay? Because it would show it made it through the last 60, 70 million years, okay, unchanged. And that would be difficult to explain. Now, it wouldn't be definitive. You'd always say, well, look, it's trapped in a certain environment, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you'd always explain around it, all right? But if you find it, hey, that'd be fun, right? We have found things that are out of place, like the coelacanth fish. This fish was supposedly a fossil fish, died a couple 100 million years ago. Except when they started showing pictures to the natives off the island of Madagascar, they said, oh yeah, we catch one of those every once in a while. No, you're giving me a hard time. Sure enough, they pull it up. It's an ugly looking thing, all right? It's got 4 or 5 fins all around. And when they bring it up real fast, the pressure differential kills them, all right? But they found a population there, and then they started finding them along India and all that. Shows up in the fish markets every once in a while when they go deep, all right? This is what they call a living fossil. There's a lot of these that they've found. Supposedly animals that have remained remarkably unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. Or they just didn't get killed, okay?
You see, my thought process is, if creationists would go after the design, evolutionists would have to back down. But because creationists are constantly talking about 6,000 years, I think that's where the battle is lost, and not on the design, because there is so much evidence that this could not have been by accident, it could not have been by evolution, and there is no evidence of finding anything that is half functional. Nothing.
Well, they say there is. There are transitional
Just
forms.
one example
Well,
of something that wasn't functional, something that has an organ that wasn't functional.
Well, it
Less
doesn't have to be
development.
non-functional. It just has to be.
No, it has to be non-functional for the evolution to work.
No, they explain around that too.
How?
Well, the intelligent design community is out there. They don't mention 6,000 years. They just talk about design, all right? And they're still blown off by the evolutionists because they say, you know, you're bringing in the God factor, and that's not science, okay? Well, again, if the evidence points a certain way, then you should be able to consider it. It shouldn't be outside of the realm of science. And in fact, the guys who started science didn't think that way. You know, the Newtons, the other guys, all right, and they did good science. The problem is now God is by definition put outside of the process, okay? So it almost doesn't matter what you talk about, all right? The reason I like to talk about the age of the earth every once in a while is because, one, that's a hard one to crack. You know, the Bible does seem to suggest a few thousand years. Now, there are some Christians who think, no, it's talking millions of years old.
No, I'm not talking millions.
Yeah, I understand, but there are a lot who explain it that way, that evolution is what you can put into the Bible. I would suggest that's a hard sell, because words mean things, all right? The Bible seems to suggest just thousands of years for everything. So I can approach them on 2 fronts. I can do the carbon-14 stuff and talk about it, all right? Because somebody's going to have to explain that after a while, all right? I can talk about design, all right? I can also show how the evidence fits into my model, all right? Because for a long time when dinosaurs came out, they sort of crashed creation. It was something new, you know, never seen before. And obviously God didn't make that, that was something in before time. Well, no, it fits into the model, all right? We can work it in. These aren't creatures that, you know, spin and come from outer space, all right? These are beautifully designed creatures, and the more we look at them, they're exquisite too, so I could pull out my design argument there. And for instance, with dinosaurs, and we've had this guy here a couple of times, they're starting to find soft tissue, all right? Blood vessels and stuff. All right, how do you preserve that for millions of years? I have no idea. And if we start pulling out DNA and are able to do something, stuff like that, that's going to be very interesting to look at, all right? So that's how I approach it, because science has its limits. I can only talk about stuff I can see, all right? Now I can review the implications, and that's what Darwin did. He said, well, you know, these finches look like they could probably do that. We've learned that since that's not the case. All right, we learned, for instance, the marine iguanas and the land iguanas actually interbreed. Okay, whoops, it's not a separate species necessarily. All right, in fact, they look a lot like the iguanas on the mainland. All right, looks like we had radiations of these creatures after the flood, like we're talking about. And variation and change can happen quickly, again, if you have the right kind of conditions. All right, we think there's a lot of built-in variation in people and animals. I mean, you look around the room, there's a lot of variation. Some good, some, well, you know.
It's been said that a few of us were animals.
That's right. And, you know, we act like it every once in a while.
We are making an observation that we do have not only curiosity but also desire, as in a wanting of certain things to be self. Okay, and then we have to observe too, the PhD after the name or a Nobel laureate associated with the name does not eliminate that factor of people wanting to see things a certain way. And that's what we're running into, and it's a stubborn enough thing so that if somebody doesn't want the evidence to go a certain way, he will ignore what it is. And we've also talked about some bodies of evidence that don't tend to be really well known, and so they get blown off without any further observation, like not only the archaeological evidence, but also the documentary evidence. The history of man writing is a known chunk of time and goes back a certain amount of time, okay, and then that particular chunk of time is long for thousands of years. They actually have a good track of. Okay, and then before that, they have in the earliest writings people saying before this there was the flood. Okay, and that's put down as history, and you have a tremendous amount of that. So you have all this body of evidence is very convenient to ignore because it takes a stunning amount of patience to go through that amount of stuff and figure it out, the languages and all that. And then you throw in the bias, and we don't want to hear about that, okay? And then it becomes unknown for several reasons. One of them that it's not convenient, and the other is that it's being refused, okay? And so we have to face the detail here that very educated, very bright, very intelligent people have their biases that they carry out no matter what. And then we're running into that, and that means that for some of them, or many of them, however thoroughly you present the material here, however exhaustively it goes, and however universally recognized the evidence should be, you're going to have someone who refuses to see it, and indeed they will come up with very clever reasons why they shouldn't have to look at it. So there is not only curiosity, but there is also desire, if you will, bias, and sometimes the bias is a more powerful force at hand than the scientific curiosity. And I'll give you one illustration that you read in the newspaper for how that is. The taunts that people get if they say there is male and female. Okay, remember when that used to be obvious and now it is not politically correct? Then you have very intelligent people who will say you are incredibly stupid and don't know what you're seeing because you have this idea that there's male and female. Okay, so you have a political shift in which the desire of things is completely wiped out, any sense of science or any sense of curiosity about how things are. Okay, if you have a bias in the population that will deny something that we very directly see, male and female, you can see that bias, a bias like that, will enter in very strongly when we say, all right, what did happen historically? okay? And, you know, it helps to have a little bit of objectivity about the evidence and not be too closed. But now the politically correct thing is saying that virtually anything, no matter how absurd, can be put upon you as something you're obligated to believe because you were told to, even by people claiming scientific credentials. Okay, it's kind of a mess, okay? And we're dealing with that kind of irrationality, and it is not just in a recent year that it came about. It has been around for a long time, and the label of scientific objectivity does not change the dynamic that we're dealing with. And we have to admit, okay, we are dealing with some of that gross irrationality stuck in the middle of what is supposed to be a rational discussion about what the evidence means.
Just to date, there were 2 news items, along with Mark is saying there. One item in the news today was that they are spending to train 4,000 teachers in Australia, and equivalent $2.6 million to teach little preschool kids gender neutrality, and that they want them to understand that there's no difference. And the other news item was some university, I don't know where it was, but
It takes the university to do most of this kind of stuff.
to have confession booths, and men are supposed to go there. It was from 10 to 2 to tell how they regret their masculinity, and the ultimate goal is to say that there's no such concept as masculinity. I mean, it's just, it's totally an inversion of truth.
Now, what does Romans 1 say? It says
Yeah.
they know the truth, but they suppress it.
Right.
Okay? So you've got people out there who actually know, okay, but they'll suppress it. They'll suppress it in their own minds, they'll suppress it collectively. All right? This gender thing to me is one that's really just off the wall now, okay? Because things we accepted, I mean, it would, for thousands of years, most civilizations have thought this way. All right, you got some maybe outliers out there, but that's what they were, outliers. But now we're saying stuff like this. And even little kids know that's not true, okay? They know the difference because mommy looks different than daddy, all right? Okay? Now, of course, if I got 2 daddies or 4, then, you know, okay, I can see where you get some confusion, and that messes with the kid's head, all right? But it used to be society reinforced some of these. So like you say, we're seeing a basic irrationality arise in some of these areas that's just, it
has been
we're
there.
the nutty ones.
It has been there in academia.
It has been there,
As
yeah.
long as there was any academia.
Right, because they raised reason above scripture, and then it just went off on their own hubris does some of this. Not that we don't have to answer the questions. I'm not saying too we have all the answers, because we don't have, you know, if you give me $100 million of funding and a couple of universities, all right, give me 20 years, I'll come up with some more stuff, all right? But we're talking about how it fits in reasonably. We're not totally out to lunch, I don't think. All right, there are some things in scripture that are very difficult to explain from a scientific
We are
perspective.
making progress, and there is increased awareness about real fallacies with the evolutionary perspective, but yet, we just a few days ago, my wife and I were in San Diego at the zoo, and you look at, you used one of your terms was theoretical reconstruction, and you look at some of these exhibits that describes the animal, you can see the animal, and then they'll have another section over here that tells the theoretical rendition of the extinct, whatever,
Right.
so many millions and millions of years ago.
Right, so
And
the
you just
story is
you
there.
see it everywhere. Like, we took the bus ride, and when we went by the giraffes, the driver, she said, well, look at the giraffes. Now, what is in that hump? What is that hump for? No, it was the camel, not the giraffe.
Yeah,
That's
giraffes don't have humps, yeah, all right.
the camel. What's in the hump? And one response was, well, it's water. And she said, oh no. She says, it's the fat. It lives off the fat. And she says, what a marvelous example of adaptation. And I thought to myself, what a marvelous example of creation.
See, so a lot of times it's a perspective. You can look at the same thing and think of it a totally different way depending on the worldview or the glasses you're looking at, all right? So in some senses, like Romans 1 says, the evidence isn't going to matter All right, they're gonna suppress the truth.
Without excuse.
All right, but, okay, so there's a spiritual component to all this. Now, and again, in the secular's mind, that doesn't exist, although a lot of them are coming more and more to this, out in the universities and all that, so there's another level that's coming in now. Well, they'll accept any other kind of spirituality except Christianity, which is very interesting, all right? That gets us back into Old Testament stuff, all right, for that. So it's an interesting time. So we can make our case, that's what we're supposed to do, okay? We're supposed to, what does it say in Scripture? It says, be able to give an answer for the hope that lies within you with meekness and with fear. So that's what we were trying to do here with this particular subject, okay? And what you'll get is the same response Paul got on Mars Hill. Some will believe they want to hear more. Some will think you're out to lunch, okay? And that's fine. Most will probably think you're out to
They called
lunch.
him a babbler,
Right,
which is a fun thing considering how eloquent Paul was.
right. So that's all we can do, all right?
He said he was a simple talker, but you know he wasn't from reading his Greek.
Yeah, if you talk like you wrote, oh no. All right.